Eye on the Islands is a weekly talk show dedicated to the people and the issues of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, here's your host for Eye on the Islands, Sarah Lazama.
The U.S. Department of Justice has moved for federal takeover of the territory's prison system. Hi, I'm Sarah Lazama, and welcome to this edition of Eye on the Islands. Joining me is Mr. Dwayne Benjamin, Assistant Director of the VI Bureau of Corrections, to talk about how the Bureau found itself in this position and what its plans are to fight the federal motion for receivership. Mr. Benjamin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me here today.
Now, the Bureau has been beleaguered with this federal consent decree for some time now, over 20 years, correct?
That's correct.
What exactly does the consent decree mean for the Bureau?
Well, the consent decree is an agreement between two parties that have a similar interest to improve situations at a particular facility. In this instance, we have been in a consent agreement with the Federal Department of Justice for about 25 years. The initial litigation started in 1986, and as such, they identified several areas of concern relating to conditions at the facilities here in the Virgin Islands, and in particular at Golden Grove. The territory has agreed to work on improving those conditions, and we have been doing that diligently since that time.
What types of things in particular does the consent decree cite in terms of what we need to work on?
Well, it's about four general areas. They look at fire life safety, they look at staffing, the big one is medical, mental health, and dental services, and we look at our security apparatus as well. It really talks about conditions that can maintain safe housing for offenders that are housed within our facilities, and that they are entitled and receive the types of services that they're constitutionally required to receive.
Now, Golden Grove is an older facility.
Older is saying it mildly.
Does this contribute to a lot of the problems that we have at the prison?
Yes, it does. Unfortunately, where other jurisdictions have been building newer prisons that would bring them more in line and compliance with several of state and federal mandates, we have not been able to do that here in the territory. Golden Grove is approximately 50 years old, and as such, when the design was built at that time, there wasn't such a great push for the type of services that are now being required to provide. And as a result of that, we have not been able to make some of the adjustments and renovations necessary to bring that online. Our facilities are a more direct supervision type of facility that requires more staff than most facilities require for, operations. So while it might be an easier fix elsewhere, here it's not an easier fix.
So Golden Grove has a duty to provide specific services to the inmates, and you mentioned some specific areas that the federal government is looking at: fire, life safety, security, staffing, and medical treatment. Let's talk about each one of those. What does fire, life safety mean?
Well, fire life safety includes everything from basic sanitation of the environment, that we have the appropriate fire devices in place, whether you want to talk about extinguishers, evacuation routes, emergency plan, emergency preparation. All of that is inclusive of fire life safety. You want to make sure that the environment where the offender is housed does not have any obstacles or obstructions that would prevent a loss of life in the event of any emergency evacuation, be it fire or storms.
Okay. And what about the medical treatment?
Medical treatment has been one of the largest challenges that we have been facing over the last several years, but I'm proud to say that we were prepared to make a motion to the court to have that order vacated as well. We have come 360 in medical services. Our offenders are now being treated within the facility. There's no need to seek outside services, only in the event of specialty services. So we've hired the staff tremendously. We have just about every professional on staff: adequate nurses, adequate physicians, medical director that's responsible for the operation. We have a clerical staff as well to support some of the functions that medical services have. One of the most challenging component now for the offender is mental health, which is a part of medical. A lot of our offenders now are exhibiting signs of mental illness, and those that have been arrested now, we are mandated to provide those same services for them while they institutionalize as well. So as a result of that, we've now have psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, counselors, all of the same services that someone ought to receive in the general community, we are mandated to provide. And I'm very, very satisfied with medical, mental health, and dental services. The feds have agreed to that as well. They have seen considerable improvement on that aspect of our operations, and very soon we should be making a motion to have that portion of the consent decree vacated.
Now, I know that staffing or personnel has been an issue for the prison, and that goes hand in hand with security. Let's talk about those issues.
Well, since the present administration, we have hired in excess of 100 additional correctional officers. As you know, that exam is administered to the Department of Personnel, Division of Personnel. And unfortunately, we're not getting the type of numbers that we would like to get. We are competing with police, we're competing with the military, we're competing with other law enforcement agencies for the same pool of candidates. And you know, it's a challenging fight, but historically throughout corrections, this is a national problem in all law enforcement, trying to get the numbers that you need. So if you can't get the numbers that you need, how do you work with what you have? And we have been very creative in terms of retaining staff, recruiting additional staff, and I think our numbers are to the national average. Again, as you indicated, security is in fact in line with staffing, and although we have over time being accumulated by our staff, we still have to provide the same level of security that we need to provide, and we will continue that move to recruit additional employees to come in, online staff as well. And we're talking primarily correctional officers, correctional professionals. Those are the types of individuals that we need. We are pretty good in terms of the services, the counselors, the non-sworn staff. Those positions and those areas we're very well staffed in, but in terms of the basic security to provide that oversight, we're still, you know, recruiting and actively recruiting both locally and nationally.
Do you feel that the personnel that you have now is adequately trained, or is that an area that we need to improve upon?
Well, I mean, improvement is needed in all areas. As you know, new technologies come about. Correction has evolved 1,000 times. So what we did in the 1980s and 1990s might not be basic correctional practices today. So we also have been utilizing and spending an enormous amount of resources and money on ongoing training, both in service as well as out service training. We've sent our managers to academies stateside. They've visited facilities that are accredited, and we are going to continue on that same mode of training our personnel that they can be the best and provide the best service that they can possibly provide. And that's going to be ongoing. We are required by our collective bargaining agreement to have about 40 hours of in-service training, and we talk on everything from CPR to life safety. I mean, number of components of training modules that we have instituted, and staff is, you know, adequately being trained. The challenge is, how do you train the entire staff when you have to run a facility 24/7, 365? So hopefully we'll get around to that, and with adequate staffing and improvement in those different areas, I think you know, brighter days are ahead.
In recent months, there's been quite a few incidents of violence occurring at the facility. What is the reason why this continues to occur, and how do we stop it? Is it that maybe the caliber of the inmates were not equipped to handle these violent offenders?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and there's no one straightforward answer to it. As you look at the criminal justice system, as arrestees come into the facility and they're detained, we take those individuals, and oftentimes you have issues that were unsettled in the community and now being settled within the facility. Our detention capacity has been pretty much high, and that's due to a number of recent arrests and convictions, and we have individuals housed within the facility awaiting sentencing. Also, you have the various threat groups in the community. Those types of issues end up within different prison facilities as well, and it is our job to maintain good security and order. Unfortunately, some of our offenders believe that the feud they have with someone that has been existing for 5 or 10 years is never settled until they, begin to do harm to each other. So that has been a direct result of that. The proliferation of the gang violence that is exhibited in the community has to go somewhere. So while it might decrease in the community, we are at a higher level of security to maintain safe order. And unfortunately, that happens sometimes. It's not unique just to the territory. It's a challenge in all facilities all over the United States. But again, we have to make sure that we have the proper intelligence, the proper information to ensure that the offenders that have issues with each other are not in close contact with each other. It might mean segregating, separating, or probably moving to another facility. And those are constantly going to be challenges that we're going to be working with. I too am not condoning the fact that violence occurs. But again, it's prison. We have some very serious offenders housed, some very bad people housed, and as such, we will try to maintain the same level of security that we are mandated by law to provide. Our ultimate goal is public safety and the safety of the offenders, and we will continue to do that.
What about the weapons that they're using to inflict harm on each other? How are these either getting into the prison or being manufactured inside the prison, and what are we doing to rid ourselves of this issue?
That's an everyday challenge. Creative minds, when you have 365 days a year, 24 hours to think about what you can possibly make out of plastic, is very interesting. So it shows you the intellectual capacity of some of our offenders to make something out of nothing. Unfortunately, this is what they do. We have a very good screening process at all of our port of entries. So we know most of the weapons and contraband that we confiscate were manufactured internally, whether by removing a piece of steel from a bunk. You'd be amazed to find what someone has made out of what you and I might treat as garbage. So this is what happens, but it's very alarming that someone might have to arm himself while housed within a facility. But again, it's prison, and a number of things happen, and unfortunately, this is what's been happening. But again, the biggest issue that we have relative to the violence is the security threat groups, with individuals that have existing issues in the community, just want to solve and resolve their problems. And, that's going to always remain a challenge.
The Bureau of Corrections recently transferred a number of inmates to stateside correctional facilities. When Eye on the Islands returns, we'll talk more about what that move means for the inmates and their families and for the prison itself.